And welcome everybody to the Pantheon Rise of the Fallen stream for April 1st, 2021. Sorry for the delay in getting started today. We did have some technical snafus, but we should be fixed up. If not, I'm sure you're going to let us know. I'm Ben Dean, producer. I'll also be hosting the show tonight. And with me, as always, is Chris Joppa Perkins. Say hi, Chris.
Hey, everyone. Glad to be here.
And David Ronick-Slough.
Hey, guys.
And with us tonight as well, we have Saicred, one of our designers. Say hi, Saicred.
Hey, guys.
So we've got a good show for you today. A little bit of fun. Saicred's joining us, as we mentioned, and he's going to go over some of the design philosophy behind things that he's doing in the game. Him and Chris are going to talk a little bit about the thought that goes into the combat, some of the tuning, some of the deeper layers, health and mana, DPS, loot tables, a lot of deep discussion. So if you're a fan of Pantheon, fan of MMOs in general, tonight's going to be a fun night for you. We're going to go over the state of the game in regards to classes. We're going to take a look at a video of some of the abilities, and we should probably get started. But before we do, just wanted to send a reminder to you. If you haven't checked it out yet, we did send out a producer's letter last week, which outlined the details for Alpha, the upcoming Alpha. Now, it didn't give a date, but what it did do is we laid out a little bit of a roadmap, which tells you what we're working on and what we intend to do prior to Alpha. It's a great read if you have a chance to take a look at it. But for tonight, we're going to focus a little bit on pre-alpha. We do have another pre-alpha session coming up next weekend, April 10th and 11th. And tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the work that's gone into that with the classes and the tuning and the balance and the stuff. So without further ado, shall we turn things over to you, Mr. Chris Perkins? Take it away.
Sure thing. So been super excited to get Tyler Saicred on a show. I have the privilege of working with Saicred a lot day to day. I don't think there's many days that go by that we're not connecting on multiple levels, just with everything that we're working on. I've had a long kind of growing friendship with Tyler, and also just a lot of admiration for the way that he sees the numbers game, basically, but not just the numbers, the way he's able to extrapolate that out into experience. That's my come from, what, the experience. I know what I want the experience to be. Tyler is able to feed into that, understand that, and then communicate that so well through numbers, through things like, tweaking different aspects of the class abilities, NPC abilities. There really is so many different, the itemization, there's so many different things that he's able to touch and kind of work with. So been super excited. And we want to start by diving into some of the combat philosophy. Tyler, I want you to have a chance to kind of, talk through, as you've come onto the team and spent, these last many months really, peering into the tuning and the balance, looking at the progression, the scaling. Tell us a little bit about, how you approach that philosophy. Feel free to reference some of the early conversations we had, and then where you've kind of taken that since then. And then we'll transition from that into some more specifics on tuning.
Okay. Yeah. So first off, thanks for having me here. It's been a joy. For people that don't know, I started out in the community years ago, 2016 now. And I was doing kind of these things on my own, and somehow found my way on the team, and been here for now about 2 years. So it's been a journey. It's been a really exciting one, and I've got to build those relationships. But kind of as you mentioned, a lot of this has come about through conversations that we've been having back and forth. For people that know Joppa, they know his creative vision and his ideas around these classes and the game, the design, and really it's a partnership that we built to allow me to start kind of honing in on those and seeing how I can bring those visions to life and help him kind of bring that to full circle, making sure that the player experience is both enjoyable as well as in the direction that we want to take it holistically as a game. So, it's been really good, been really exciting. But when I start looking at content, when I start looking at class balance, when I start looking at just the numbers overall in the game, I never want to put aside the first rule of thumb for me and for us as a team is, it needs to be fun. And, numbers are great. You can have every number in the game work out perfectly, and but it doesn't really matter if it's not fun at the end of the day. So we always try to keep that in mind, and that's why you'll always hear me ask players in pre-alpha or anywhere else, how does it feel? It's not, are the numbers making sense? It's just simply, how does it feel? Like, do you feel like it's enjoyable? And that's the number one key for me. So I guess I'll kind of roll back here and just highlight. You mentioned a little bit about what I do in the team, and I wanted to bring up just really what my focus areas are for the team as a whole right now, which is around that class balance and tuning, helping out with, really bringing those visions to life and making sure those feel good. Itemization as a whole is a huge one that goes into it with tuning, statistics, how the drop rates work, how that feels. That also feeds into the rate of progression that we have with the players, the experience, making sure that the content is there and available and that they feel, good about what they're doing and achieving along the way. And in addition to that, content difficulty, really figuring out how we want to address the content difficulty and the challenges that we put in front of players. So it's taken that and all putting it together into a holistic view so that we can start to put all the numbers in that foundation layer there so that everything on top of that is just building upon that fun, enjoyable experience and making those numbers come to life and make sense on the back end as well. But yeah, so talking about tuning, balance, just the game content. I was talking to Joppa just the other day, and I mentioned a story about myself as a young kid first entering MMOs and kind of how that fed into a lot of the challenge and difficulty I have within the combat and the content that we have in Pantheon. And it kind of it sprung upon me when I was actually doing a tuning pass just a few weeks ago, where my youngest and oldest were over here. I have a 5 and 8 year old, and they were watching me do some tuning and wanted to try the game out. And so my 8-year-old got on and tried it out a little bit. And I noticed that there were some certain things that he wasn't grasping very quickly. And so I started watching him and learning as he was playing. And it reminded me of when I started EverQuest. And for y'all that may be around my age, I was 10 going on 11 years old when EverQuest came out. And I got it on my birthday just a month after release. And so I'm an 11-year-old kid playing EverQuest and entering this world for the first time. And I remember being naive about it. I wasn't there to, conquer any giant raid boss or take on any elite dungeon content. I was really there just to explore and be a part of the world and the socialization. And that was what really brought my love about when it comes to MMOs. That was what made me passionate about the MMO space. So because of that, I always take that in consideration when I'm looking at the balance and the tuning that we have within Pantheon. Because I look at my 8-year-old, I look at my 5-year-old, and I want them to be able to have that sort of experience as well, to where they can step into a game and they can actually get in and enjoy it to that level as well. They can start to fall in love with, exploring and getting through the world and the content and figuring things out even at their young age, like many of us did with EverQuest and other games way back in the day. And I then want to be able to also take in those 20-year-old veterans that we have in the community, including myself. And I want to make sure that we have things that are challenging to them, obstacles in place that really put them on edge and make them rethink how they're approaching the combat, the encounter, the scenario, the situation, so that they can enjoy it just as much as, the 8 and 10-year-olds that we have that might enjoy it as well. There's definitely two roads that run parallel there. There's the newcomer, and then there's the old timer. So we want to make sure that we have content in place that addresses both of those individuals. And that's really where my focus has been at. It's how do we get those two roads parallel? How do we make it so that feels right? It feels meaningful. It means that, we have the new Pantheon explorer coming in and really getting their feet wet and just enjoying being a part of the social experience and being a part of the game. And then we have things in place that are really challenging, those obstacles that are just hard to overcome and take players time, effort, and, some strategic thinking to really, outmaneuver. So that's just I wanted to get that high level out there to level set with everybody where my mentality comes from when I look at a lot of the content in the world and how the balance comes about. So wanted to say that first. And then secondly, when we start talking about how we look to progress with the balance of the game, how do we start to bring to life everything? I always start with the content first. And I know I've talked to Chris about this many times, but it always comes to the world. You build the world first and you put the world there. And then we put the classes together and we give them toolkits to go out there and to take on this world and to overcome challenges in this world. But we're not necessarily putting a prescription down of exactly what you have to do. It's more, here's what you have in your arsenal. Let's see what you can do with this to make the experience your own and to go out there and explore and be a part of it and see what you can actually achieve on your own. So it's much less about getting down to that little bitty nth degree of a decimal, whether something is good or not. And it's more about making sure that we give everyone a really good and solid experience as far as fun, enjoyable combat goes. And I see Ronak over here laughing. I'm curious. Can you fill me in?
No, I'm just listening to you talk, buddy.
Okay. Never mind.
I think it was I like that you're making content for 8-year-olds because I think that's about my level. So I think that works out well for me.
Well, I had you in mind as well. My 8-year-old's a little better, so I was looking at my 5-year-old when we were talking through that.
Okay.
Yeah, he's found the mouse now, so he's good. But okay, so Chris, I know we go back and forth a lot, right? When we have our conversations, and I'd love to just kind of keep that flow and that mentality. So, now that people know a little bit about me and where my thought process comes from, in general, is there anything specific that you would like to highlight, that you would like me to emphasize a little bit more on for the community or anybody?
Yeah. I think let's take what you just described, which I think is an awesome foundation. You're looking at the accessibility of the game, knowing how much we emphasize exploration, discovery, as a tenet of the gameplay. And so, we don't want, people to hit a wall of, insane difficulty right out of the gate. There needs to be a flow into the more difficult aspects of the content. But then also we obviously, we cherish challenge as, a true pillar of the game. So with that context in mind, I think 3 of the specific things tuning wise that we want to talk about and look at, and I think it would be good for you to talk through, with what you've just shared in mind, how has that kind of guided this process specifically? Let's start with the health and the mana formulas and talk through some of the changes that we've made there over the last several months based on testing and then also based on this kind of vision you just described.
Yeah, perfect. So, it's actually been one of the biggest changes we've had to make, just for the statistics alone is getting our health and mana in a better state so that we have a little more flexibility and room to maneuver within the combat scene. It was very, very strict early on. We had a very limited pool. Everything was tied very, extremely heavy or lopsided to the stat. And because of that, we wanted to balance that out a little bit. We want to have our stats matter and be meaningful and really be impactful in the game. But at the same time, we also wanted to have a little bit more cushion and foundation at the just base level so that our players didn't just immediately walk into an encounter and if they didn't have a said single stat or two, fall over from one shot. So we've been working on that and really fine tuning how that looks going forward, scaling that so that it appropriately works with our combat scenarios, not only at level 1, but continues to scale through the higher levels. I've told you many times, but I always take that 1 to 100 approach when I'm looking at scaling. Anything is formula based. It's always going from level 1 to 100. And then we work our way in intervals there to make sure that we're kind of balancing along the way, doing some checkpoints and along the way and things. So when it comes to health and mana, we've actually done a pretty big overhaul of that. And probably one of the things I'm most excited about for our pre-alpha testers coming up here in the next sessions is allowing them to give some feedback on that because they've been very constructive on the past sessions and making sure that we are aware of how that felt ultimately to them and also how it scaled, how they felt like the progression was going with that as they were leveling up. So hopefully they'll be coming in to find that that has been not only updated but is feeling much more in line with some of their expectations, but also just in a better spot overall. It's been a pretty big update here in the last few months, so I'm excited about that one myself.
Me too. Yeah, I think the most impactful feedback for me was I'm level 8, level 9 shaman, and we're fighting a little group of bandits, and I'm getting one shot, I'm getting two shot, if I
Oh yeah.
pull aggro. And so I think you explained that well. We want our attributes to be really meaningful, but there's a balance there between making them so meaningful that every one of them is like a bleeding edge that you can fall off, on dramatically, versus, kind of leveling out that a little bit to where we still have, very impactful attributes, but it's not, one shot, two shot situation as a level 8. So it's been good work.
Yeah, it was a little bit rough for a short time, but it's one of those things where you have to build that foundation out, and you have to experience that a little bit, and you have to let it play out just a little bit to see how that feels, and if anything changes by adjusting a few things here or there before you make some big changes to the actual formulas and how those are coming about themselves. So I know people that have given feedback, they want that immediate result, they want that immediate turnaround, but we do like to let these things kind of play out a little bit so we can see if there's any change just by changing a variable over here or over here, how long it took a player to get there, what gear they had, what the attributes were overall. There's a few things we want to test out, so we do a few different runs. And if we see that there's ultimately just no way to get around doing an adjustment there, then we'll make the adjustment, and we make sure that it's fun, enjoyable. And so that's the experience that we want to, see come out in the next PA session. I'm excited about it.
So I think that's a good segue into the next two topics, which is talking a little bit about how we've adjusted the DPS, both of the classes and the NPCs, and then how the loot tables and the itemization in general has kind of followed along with that.
Oh yeah. So as mentioned, when it comes to us in our pre-alpha state right now, we loaded, and I'll start with the loot tables. So we really loaded those loot tables up to feel bulky because we wanted our testers to get a lot of loot very early, very often, to give us some feedback on how some of those statistics and stats from the loot came back. We wanted to not only that, but they had very limited time to play. So we wanted to make sure that during their limited time to play, they were able to acquire quite a bit so that we could get some testing on that and some feedback, at a very small degree at least. And with that, now that we're looking and shifting into that alpha mindset and driving that direction there, we have to make some adjustments to the loot tables to get them more in line with what we'd like them to see long term. And so as we're starting to move there, we've made adjustments. So now that you see the loot tables, they're going to be much more in line with what you would consider more realistic to kind of more release state. And, it's not going to be as early and often that you get all the gear that you were getting before. You're going to see that the coin values have been updated to make more sense and be more, acknowledge that we do have, some progression pieces where you're going to have to take a little time to maybe earn something or to achieve something. And so we've done that with the loot tables by lowering that loot that you're getting ultimately and making sure that it's more meaningful along the way. In fact, I've actually gone through and added some nice surprises through the loot tables, to really, give players something to look forward to in the next coming sessions. And it won't be as readily available as it was before, but definitely some good stuff out there now. And then in addition to that, I also talked about, as a kid, the magic of an MMO when I first got into it. The thing that really caught my attention and drove me to just fall in love with the game and the genre overall was kind of that unknown factor, and kind of running into, even as a kid, I was running into walls where I had to get friends and I had to come into this area because I couldn't do it myself. And then we'd have to overcome the challenges in front of us to, get to the next layer or the next level or, whatever it was, whether it was the top floor, bottom floor, basement, or whether it was just trying to get to a new zone because there was a lot of obstacles in our way that we couldn't overcome alone. But we ended up, I'd get with a group of individuals, or I'd find some teams here or there, some groups, and we'd start to accomplish these challenges. And so when I'm looking at putting DPS on the map, it's really now starting to put in some of those checks for the players. In the past, we've made it to where it's a little more accessible. We've made it to where the NPCs may not be as caliber or as challenging as we're going to intend them to be. And now we're starting to turn that dial up a little bit. And I'm excited to see what that feels like to our players as they now start to come into those encounters where they may have been a level or two lower and a full group and still able to, achieve success with minimal deaths or something like that. And now they may run into that same encounter or scenario, and it's not the same result. It may take them back a little bit. They may have to reset and rethink their strategy, or they may have to come back into it a little bit later once they've gained a few levels. And so yeah, I'll just kind of leave it at that and say I'm excited to get some feedback as we go through this next session.
We do have a rage quit command in the game too, so for our pre-alpha testers, if you want to try that out, and maybe we can just see how much that is used after these new tweaks. If there's too many rage quitting, then we know we're going the wrong way.
Too far, right? Just
I want to know who let loose all the comedians in chat tonight.
I know they're
I'm having a really hard time keeping a straight face. I'm not gonna lie.
they're egging them on.
Oh man,
I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's April Fool's, all right.
Tell you what.
I mean, I'll put the helmet on if you guys want. Like,
that's something you got to go with your gut on, man.
Yeah, maybe when I ask the questions later, the helmet will come out.
So one of the things that when we talk about progression, we talk about balance, progression, combat, all the things we're discussing. Classes is a pretty big theme, I guess, in terms of, how are these things affecting the current classes? And then we wanted to talk a little bit tonight too about just kind of what to expect on the class front. What classes are we working on currently? What classes can you expect? What are some of the changes that we've been making with the current classes, etc.? So let's start with what to expect class-wise. We know right now for our pre-alpha testing sessions, the one we're going into, the upcoming one, we're going to have the Dire Lord, the Shaman, the Dire Lord, the Shaman, the Wizard, the Rogue, and the Enchanter. Those 5 classes are, the kind of the standard fare that we've had for a while. And those are the classes that we chose very specifically to kind of kick off the class implementation post refactor. There's a lot of reasons for that. We call them kind of foundation classes, basically, where because of the type of mechanics that those classes need, oftentimes the other classes are built on the back of those classes. They're built on the backs of the mechanics of those classes. So those 5 classes represented the 5 kind of, they covered the roles and the archetypes we wanted and needed for complete testing. They also were very foundational. The classes we're moving into next are going to be the Monk, followed by the Ranger, followed by the Summoner. And it's kind of the same thinking there with those 3 classes. Not only are those 3 classes, not only do they have the more complicated mechanics underneath them to support them, things like the pet system, things like ranged combat, the Monk using a completely unique suite of animations and also a lot of unique ability types. Charge up abilities, for example, is going to be a significant one with the Monk. So abilities where you can tap the key to get an instant, effect, but you can also hold it down and charge it to release a greater effect. You'll see things like that in like Gap Closer for a Monk with, you can think of their Rage and Gale kick, which is kind of like a Liu Kang kick from Mortal Kombat, where you can actually charge it up and then release it and fly greater distance to your target and crack them real hard with a kick to the face. So, but those are the kind of those are the reasons why we've chosen those 3 classes to do next, because as we're looking towards getting to alpha, part of the road to alpha is going to be obviously getting our classes further along, and we want to start earlier with the more complicated ones. So those are the next 3 classes that you can expect, which is super exciting. And in addition to that, again, as foundation classes, we're going to be able to continue to build out more complex NPC encounters as well, because now we're going to have NPCs who are able to use pets. We're going to have NPCs who are able to use the ranged combat system. And we're going to just see a variety of different abilities that will now be supported as those classes become fully implemented. Now, in addition to that, I'd love, Tyler, to kick it back to you. Let's talk a little bit about some of the tweaks we've been making to classes, the current classes, based on some of this greater balancing and tuning we've been doing.
Yeah, so the current class is specific. I mean, it's been really encouraging and eye-opening to how players are utilizing certain classes. We come into it with an expectation of, here's the kit that we're providing you, and here's what we expect that you're going to do with this kit. And it never fails that our player base is creative and innovative, and they come up with these unique ways to utilize these classes that are very, not only encouraging because it kind of surpassed what we expected it might be able to do, but it also helps us to understand where we might want to go with some of the tuning and tweaks in the future. And so with that in mind, it's really now starting to isolate the identity of the classes and start to really emphasize on giving them the kit that allows them to really focus on that and to really bring that to the forefront of what they're capable of doing. In addition to that, it's not only that, but it's giving them some, I don't want to say guardrails, but basically guardrails in place so that we continue to keep them kind of in check to what they're capable of doing or not. Some players have shown us some really, like I said, some really exciting ways to play a class, and some players have shown us that it's very difficult to understand certain classes. So we want to make sure that they're not only kind of there to discover, but they're a little bit intuitive to start with. You kind of get into a class and you start to understand it, you understand the logic and feel to it, and you start to really build upon that. And so that's where that early to late game experience comes in. We want to try to make sure that not only feels good, but that the tuning in place makes sure that they, when in a group, feel like they're meaningful, feel like they matter, feel like they have a matter or a success in that group that's really substantial for that group's success or not. I know I've mixed my words up there. I started reading chat. And So anyways, with that said, more specifically, looking at things like, threat generation is one that comes up a lot. So looking into that and how we're going to be approaching that in the future, how that continues to be dialed in and addressed. Looking at our, health and mana. Like I said, we have some big updates that went in with that. So we have to now address things like DPS for the classes themselves, because the health and mana updates not only apply to the players themselves, but they apply across the board. So NPCs and players alike also, receiving that update, and that's going to make sure that we are looking to now tune and adjust for the damage that our players are putting out, the damage our NPCs are putting out, and the health that are the mana and the health that, like a shaman, they're going to have to heal through what's being put out there, or potentially have the kit available to heal through that. So we want to start focusing in on that a little bit and put that out there to say that, that's going to be a highlight for us as we go forward as well, to really focus on those substantial numbers, those key factors for those classes to be successful. And I don't want to ever leave out our crowd control, trying to lock in or dial in, how potent crowd control is, what that ends up being in the long run, and how that feels for the player as well. So that, we're not overlooking that as kind of that fourth layer for that group and bringing it all together. I know it's a little bit general. Did you have anything in mind that you wanted me to hone in on for anybody? I hate to be general like that, but there's so much when it comes to these numbers, and personally, I love when players get to experience it and figure it out themselves. I know that sounds maybe cheesy to some, but part of the enjoyment from MMOs that I've had in the past was always getting in and discovering what's possible, discovering how things work. I've always felt if you gave me everything up front and told me how everything worked, then I would just go theorize it. And by the time I get into theorizing, I've already kind of missed the fun. A big majority of the fun, like I said, is that unknown quantity. It's how do these things work? What's possible? What can I find out there? What ability might drop out in the world now that I might not know about and might change the way that I play the class entirely? Something like that. So I don't know if there's anything you want me to dial in on there, but I think that's a good baseline for the community, at least for now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's well said. And the only thing I would add is that, as we make changes to classes, as we look to get them implemented, we're looking for, successful implementation of abilities, making sure they work, making sure they function well. But we're also, at this stage, very much wanting to make sure that the intended goal, the intended flavor, the intended feeling of playing these classes, the experience they're meant to encapsulate for the player, is being achieved. And so this is also the stage where we're looking at, the current arsenal, of abilities, both in combat and then kind of the secondary out of combat, extracurricular type abilities that the different classes have, and just making sure that the class framework and the feeling and the experience of these classes is actually happening. It's one thing to have everything on paper. It's another thing to, is it really playing like we intended to in terms of the overall feel? So that's a big part of our scrutinizing right now. But no, yeah, I think you said it well. I'm super excited for the upcoming tests. It's been a little bit since our last one, so there's a lot of changes. I think the game is in a significantly improved and more thoroughly developed state when it comes to everything we've been discussing tonight. I think that's going to be very palpable, and I'm really excited for the feedback, as I know you are as well.
Yeah, I will say we get feedback early and often from our community, whether they're watching through streams or whether they're in the pre-alphas or, enjoying that. And it's encouraging. It's always encouraging, and constructive or not, it's always encouraging, because it means that they're not only paying attention, but they're starting to discover things that, just watching. It's amazing to me how quickly the players start to pick up on little subtle hints out there in the world and things that are happening. But in addition to that, like you said, we've got the foundation now, and now we can start looking to implement on top of that for these classes as well going forward. We can start to build out those kits a little bit more and show some of the creative and fun solutions or pieces of that toolkit that we've got on the back burner that have not yet been discovered or been made aware of to the community. So I think there's a lot of fun to come with these classes, even as the foundation classes. There's a lot of things that players are going to get to uncover and discover with these classes that are possible, in the future. So,
oh yeah,
exciting.
Oh yeah, cool, very cool. Well, I know we've got a pretty sizable QA section cooked up for us. We also want to get a few patch notes in.
I'm just going to keep this video running. We still have lots of samples. So I'm just going to keep that running while we do the Q&A.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Yeah. First of all, I just want to say that I hadn't seen the new monk animations. They look amazing. The backflips and stuff are sweet. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is for either of you guys who.
Well, we're going to do patch notes first, right?
Patch notes. That means Dave sings.
Never.
Yeah. I thought you were getting ready to sing.
Oh, not tonight.
Okay. All
right,
I'm going to go through this super quick. Yeah, I'm going to read them as you would read a list if you got a list written down. Here we go. Fixed the shield bone mask for casting animations. Massively huge server performance gains from spawn system optimizations and memory use reductions. Massive RPC performance improvements. Animator calling updates. Optimized light calling.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. When you say massive, it's massive. Like we're kind of laughing about it internally here, but when those updates were coming in, the wording that was used was massive performance updates and massive, but they were massive. There's no other way to describe it. The performance updates were massive. Really good stuff.
Yeah, we can tap Kyle to get him to put into layman's terms like how to quantify how much of an improvement it was. I mean, it is truly massive. We optimized light culling, optimized action animations, several fixes to equipment rendering. Again, massive client server performance improvements related to inventory modifications specifically, as well as crafting and vendors. Those are three major optimizations, three major performance improvements over the course of this month, which just been really exciting. A few fixes to world item responsiveness. That includes a fix for the potential to loot extra world items when spam clicking, depending on whether there was high latency involved. Fix for items overflowing in the crafting UI. Item buffs now reapply on Resurrect if they don't persist death. We've had several font rendering improvements. We've improved the character ground snapping at high movement speeds. And we've improved climbing hit detection. We fixed some herky-jerky issues with transitions between moving into climbing into hanging and those state changes. We fixed several issues with world items becoming unclickable when moving between zones that have large differences in networking time. And on the 3D art front, there's been a ton of just massive ongoing work with the terrain tech. It's something that is just super exciting that we'll be talking more about soon. And we've seen the elkhorn and the birch tree variations come online, which is for Thronefast, Aventur's Pass, a lot of the eastern side of King's Reach in those areas, in the biomes of those zones. So it's been really awesome. Some amazing work that Jimmy's done on the trees to see those come online. It's just really been exciting to see. So we'll leave it there. Again, these are not exhaustive. These are meant to be highlights. And then on top of that, a lot of the class stuff and the class work we've been talking about, in addition to all the balancing and the tuning, is also a big portion of the work that's been being done this month. And we'll leave it there. All right, David, kick it to you.
Sweet. Okay, I'm just going to kind of jump around here a little bit. We'll start with, is it currently a public design goal that any class will be able to perform 3 combat roles? So I think they're kind of talking a little bit about how the rogue, is kind of hitting in that CC area, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine, Tyler, we'll tag team several of these.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to just kick it off, like it is a design goal. I would say it could be a stated design goal that classes that have defined primary roles would be able to flex into a secondary role for a period of time. And I use that word flex specifically, not just to say they can, move into a different role, but if you think about like literally flexing a muscle, you can only do it for so long. You can only flex for so long until you have to release that. And so the idea is when classes are able to flex into a secondary role, it's for a limited period of time, and it's at the expense or the cost of their primary role. You're not going to see a rogue, for example, be able to top the DPS charts while they're doing anything really regarding crowd control. That's not the intent. We also want to be very careful about not, the question asked about 3 roles, and that's certainly not the plan. We want classes to operate according to a primary role and be able to flex at time for shorter periods of time into secondary roles, depending on what class it is.
Cool.
Yeah. Can you add that, Tyler?
Yeah, and I would add. So I know that people highlight the rogue, for example, where they were able to Minus showed off the rogue's capability of doing CC, and that comes into tuning and passes that we'll do to tweak that to make it feel exactly how we want it to feel. It might be a little strong right now, and in that case, that's fine. But you also have to consider if there were classes like the Enchanter brings not only that crowd control functionality, but they also bring other pieces to their arsenal that the Rogue can't provide. So when we start to look at the mana consumption and start to really tune that and dial that in to really make that feel, significant, that Enchanter and their capability within the area of mana that may become very pivotal for a group. So it's not only the fact that they can perform that primary function, but they also have alternative means or reasons to bring them and to really fulfill what they're doing within that group and make it more than somebody's secondary, function that they're flexing into. So, I think that we have to always remember there's not just, 3 primaries for us. We focus on 4 when it comes to design. We have, the 4 types there, and we really want to make sure that those are emphasized and that they're meaningful and that they're thought of throughout. We don't want to ever kind of leave one off or not think of it or not consider it. And so we're always keeping that in mind and first and foremost. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of small tuning that goes into that over time, and we'll definitely dial that in as we go through pre-alpha and alpha. But it's going to be it's going to be something we have to make sure that classes are not so one-dimensional that you just basically have to hope that nobody else in the server is playing your class so you can find a group. So
before we move on from this, I kind of want to say again, too, because I see this question come up a lot in the form of a concern, that there's concerns that, we're going to end up in a situation where all classes can kind of do all things and there's a lot of homogenization. And I just want to make it clear and also remind everyone that, like, the reason we have intentionally stayed away from a talent system, the reason we've intentionally stayed away from specializations within classes is specifically because we value class identity so highly. So you're not going to see a situation where we are allowing that to slide so far that we start having classes, blurring the line and leapfrogging into different class roles. That's just a line that we're not willing to cross. Do we believe that we can allow classes to flex for limited periods of time into secondary roles? Yes. Has the rogue in recent streams proven to be able to go beyond that point and literally fill the full competent role of a CC dedicated class? Yeah, I think they have. I don't necessarily want them to be overly nerfed, I guess you could say, in terms of their CC ability, because that's a really important aspect of the class. But it's a little too easy right now. There's really not a whole lot of risk involved in terms of, even the sense that their ability could be resisted or could be, there's just a lot of variations to come in, or variables that are not at play yet, that just make it a little too easy and a little too clean for a rogue to lock down so much. That being said, it's a really important part. The same with a monk. A monk being able to flex into an off-tank role, that needs to be a significant thing, something that monks genuinely have occasion to want to do, but flex. So limited time at the cost of their primary role, have some risk to it, or at least some tension involved in it. That's the idea.
I'm glad you guys cleared that up, because I don't want people actually thinking that Minus is a good player. Okay, moving on. Does balance mean that all characters should perform equally well in one specific encounter zone, or will some perform better in one situation versus another, and then in another zone encounter the opposite would hold true? I hope you got that.
I'll let you take this time.
Yeah, that was a long one there, but so I guess what we're hearing is, are we going to be looking at situational, I guess you could say importance versus nonsense, like just kind of generalized? Is that what you're trying to sum it up to?
I think they're asking, basically if characters does balance mean they can perform well in one area and not in another, if that's intended, or...
I just wanted to see you stumble through that for a minute. So really,
when CP was talking about flexing, I was going to make a joke that you've been doing it this whole time, but it's cool. I thought we were on this peace thing, but I guess that's out the window. So I see where we're at. It's because I picked on your buddy Minus. I know.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just say, so, having classes be able to perform better in certain situations is definitely going to be viable. We're going to have, like you said, class identity is important. Certain classes have unique kits and skill sets and tools in their arsenal that allow them to perform very well in certain situations. And yes, when it comes to balance, that's part of the equation, where we have to consider that where one class may excel in a certain situation, they may fall very weak or feel very weak in another situation, because they're vulnerable to that aspect or that situation more so than other classes may be. So it's a way of balancing, of course, but there's a lot that goes into that, and there's also potential ways that players can find to kind of mitigate those situations, to where they may have to look at their gear, lay out their arsenal in which they're coming to the plate with, as far as what their abilities are. But not only that, they may have to look at what their group comp is. It may not be that, they may not be able to just overcome that situation alone. They may have to rely on their other teammates to change the way that they're approaching that situation to help them out along the way. Whereas in another situation, they may not need their team at all. They may be able to really excel in their team with their group, to take on that encounter, or that, overcome that without anybody having to change anything. So it not only becomes part of the balance in the classes, but it becomes part of the conversation and how the players are coming together to overcome this together. If we make a class somewhat weak in an area, or if we have a design decision to make a class that very strong in an area, there's probably other classes that either one, benefit from that, or two, can help supplement that. So that, at the end of the day, it's all about bringing that group together and them working together to find out what the solution is that they can use in their capability or in their toolkits to overcome the challenge ahead of them. And yeah, certain cases, certain groups will be more efficient or more effective in certain situations than others, but it doesn't mean that the other group can't be successful. It just means that they may have a little bit tougher time and have to adjust in a different way.
Cool. Good answer. Surprisingly. Okay. When designing and balancing content within Pantheon, do you consider the bards and necromancers spells and abilities? This is a little sneaky question. And do you consider how those classes will affect the content you've created so far?
Yeah, I'll throw this one over to Chris.
Well, for sake of time and resources, we've actually just decided to combine the bard and the necromancer into a single class. The Necard. I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be a very non-traditional take on both of those classes.
We're always trying to push the boundaries here at Visionary Realms. So
that's right. That's right.
And you guys have been begging for it. You've been asking for it, so we thought we'd answer your call.
Yeah. Yeah. What better, quicker way to get them out than just kind of mash them together? So I think it'll be cool. It's going to be cool.
I mean, a singing corpse, riser. That sounds pretty good to me. Yeah, I like the sound of that.
Yeah. The short answer is yes. Yes, we do. The short answer is yes, we do. And I think that'll become more clear as we get, a little bit further along and we're in a position to start talking about those two classes directly. But absolutely. And, Tyler alluded to it earlier as far as, when he's working through, formulas and different things specifically, he's always looking at that from a 1 to 100 spectrum. Like we're looking way beyond the max level at launch to really, make sure that we're accounting for several expansions worth and years worth of growth in the game. It's the same thing with, the classes that we know are coming down the pike. And really a lot of it is building in intentional holes, intentional gaps in, abilities or, different things that it's just specific and unique ways that abilities work together or, looking at the crowd control. Same thing that we've had to do with the healers, same thing we've done with the tanks in terms of you have these classes that are filling the same primary role. How do they do it? And in what specific ways do they do it? So the answer is yes.
Great.
Can I just add that I'm probably more excited about bringing those classes online for a completely different reason. And not only those, but the rest of the classes that we have, because it's going to give me more in the arsenal of challenging content. To your point you made earlier, the classes as they come online, they're giving us new abilities to start putting into the world that players have to be aware of and have to pay attention to. So it's not only bringing those classes online for players to enjoy, but it's also for me to enjoy putting out there and putting those obstacles in place so that players can start to discover those and run into those and find new and unique ways to use those abilities and, in encounters. And having that content available is going to be a lot of fun for me as well. So, yeah, I got to say I'm probably just as excited as the community to get those online, but it's a lot of times for almost a completely different reason.
Okay, moving on. Is it true that Saicred hums the tune for Green Acres while he works, and does he wear overalls during the company meetings while chewing on a hayseed? CP, I don't know if you want to handle that one or.
Chewing on a hayseed? Is that a thing?
Yeah. Okay. What escape mechanisms, if any, are intended for when you realize you're in over your head, or if you are walking through the tall grass and happen upon vicious snakes that you couldn't see? So I guess
definitely depends on your class. Yeah, I mean, it just ultimately depends on your class. It depends on what you've found in the world that's available to you, and certain classes may have a more readily available escape mechanism, something that's just kind of a no-brainer. Other classes may have to be creative and, or may have to look into what's available in their itemization that they can help them out. So there's some potential options there, we'll say, but definitely it just depends on the circumstance in the class and where you're at and what's going on. There's a lot of things that play into that question that, you don't have a one and done answer for in a lot of cases.
CP, you want to add anything or moving on?
It just makes me think of all the times that's happened to me. And, you have as many options as your class allows and as your mental state allows in terms of, are you going to freak out and run around in circles and die? Or are you going to root it? Are you going to stun it? Are you going to, pop some kind of a run speed potion that you have at the ready? Are you with other people? Is there a guard nearby? Zone line? All kinds of options.
This is a cool one. And will all classes in Pantheon be able to acquire any, some, or all of the available non-combat abilities, skills, spells, or rolls? So for context, would a non-rogue be able to like detect and disarm traps or pick locks or something of that nature? Or is it all going to, are those things only going to be for classes?
I mean, it's kind of tough to answer that across the board. So let's just use the rogue one, for example. So pick lock. Rogues are kind of the masters of mechanical locks. Whereas wizards would be have more mastery over arcane locks, magical locks. And then beyond that, you get into the realm of keepers and the perception system, where they would have certain advantages on enigmatic locks. So it's not like there's just one skill, like a pick lock, that only rogues have and no one else does, or anything like that. However, there will be some restrictions on just about all of those, unless they're designed to be universal, where not everyone would be able to do it.
We probably have time for one or two more, and then we should probably wrap her up.
Okay. How are you creating tension between the age-old MMO design favoring vertical progression in favor of horizontal progression? I'd throw you an easy one.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And while you're at it, can you explain the ups and downs of RPU?
Yeah,
No.
we'll stick to the progression for a second, and then we'll go to that one next. So like I said, there's the simple formulas put in place to scale vertically throughout, and you can just kind of mathematically lay that out and put that in place. But when you start talking about horizontal progression, you also have to consider what we have currently available and what we may add in the future, and how we could build upon that layer of that foundational layer. So we look at things like the mastery system. We look at things like just experience gain and how fast and quick that is versus what gear is accessible or potentially available to players, how often that drops. All of that plays into the progression of a player, and it may not feel immediately like, oh, I'm horizontally progressing. But if you're gaining more gear to gain access to new areas, but you're not gaining level, I mean, that is horizontal progression. So you might get to an area where you need to be, a climate, when we start talking about climate and talking about, different types of environments that are in the areas, you may have to acquire things that help you overcome that. And that's part of that horizontal progression as well, where players are not just looking to vertically gain levels and experience, but they're also looking to acquire gear and abilities and parts of that toolkit within their itemization that help them overcome things. And so that's a big part of it. And like I said, mastery, I think, is going to be a huge one that's very just fundamentally fun to build out and really allow players to experience and enjoy. But it's going to be really impactful to the player as well to allow them to really expand upon their own skill sets and, as a player, their own experiences in the game.
What gets me really excited? There's another question on there that is like, okay, you just hit level 50.
I was just about to ask the one. That's okay. My question.
I think they're really closely connected.
All right, I'm going to ask the question because you're going to steal my job and then I'll get fired.
Okay,
you and your friends hit level 50.
That's not the reason you're going to.
Sorry. You and your friends hit level 50 finally. You guys log in next. You talk amongst yourselves about what to do next. What are some option players might have? How would that conversation go between you, meaning us, guys right now? All right, now you can answer the question, CP.
Yeah, that's a great question. They're both really good questions. And I'll just say what I'm thinking of right now in this moment, but I love that it's an example of what kind of experience I believe Pantheon is going to offer. You hit level 50, you're no longer leveling up. You can't level up anymore, at least, in the current moment you're in. And there is the gear progression. There is the mastery progression. There is that ongoing vertical progression of I'm making my character incrementally stronger. And I think that's an awesome loop. Always feel like you have something to be chipping away at there. But honestly, the two things that are most exciting to me right now are nighttime and underwater in Pantheon. And I'm going to explain those two things. Nighttime, because when you reach level 50 and you think of all of the zones and all the world that you've gone through and your kind of single path towards max level, and then you've been conditioned through playing Pantheon that this is a lovingly, thoughtfully crafted world with all kinds of nooks and crannies and secrets and places to explore and things to discover. And when you also marry that to the fact that nighttime in Pantheon, both lore wise and the actual gameplay experience, is going to be an almost completely different experience. This is something that Tim Wathen, Convo, has put a lot of energy and thought into, like, the nighttime experience. And so I'm instantly at level 50 thinking, I want to go back through all of these zones and experience nighttime and explore at night and travel at night and search and talk to people at night and see, like, what are the different kinds of things that are going to happen at nighttime? What might I find? And it's the same with underwater. We've talked about it off and on in the past, and it's not something we're putting a whole lot of emphasis on right now, but the plan, the philosophy of underwater is to lay down the whole overland content just in an underwater setting. In a lot of games, you go underwater and there's just as many NPCs and they're just as dense and it's kind of all the same experience. Whereas what we're going for is more of that, like, murky, expansive abyss. And there's all kinds of, like, aspects to explore and things that you can see down in the murky depths. And you've got the pressure and the anaerobic climates kind of working against you, and you've got currents underwater that are working against you, and you've got these different abilities and itemizations that can help you sink deeper and swim faster and breathe longer and ride currents farther and faster and different things. And you start to just imagine, like, the verticality that Pantheon offers, what that provides in the up and in the down. And that, to me, is one of the things that's most exciting when I think of horizontal gameplay. I'm a huge, like, romantic adventurer and explorer and discoverer at heart. Like, that's the kind of stuff that gets me most excited and energized about these games. And I think Pantheon's going to have it in spades.
We have so many good questions in the chat. I think at some point soon we're probably going to have to do another, like, burning question stream. But I think Ben's probably going to put a kibosh on this one, or do we have time for one or two more? Or?
Well, we're at an hour now, so we should probably wrap it up. But I want to thank everybody for coming out and all those questions. We love hearing from you. We love your feedback. Tyler, thanks for coming on. It's great to have you. We'll have you on more for sure. Chris and Dave, pleasure as always having you as well.
Yeah, awesome job, Tyler, and great questions, everyone. This was really fun to dig into, and awesome stuff.
If you're just hearing about Pantheon for the first time, we are a crowdfunded game. We do make progress in the game from your pledges. Head on over to pantheonmmo.com/pledge to see what kind of pledge rewards are available to you. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Thanks all.
Bye, guys.